So today's topic is French influence on English language. Okay, as we all know that the English literary period is divided into several parts, and it begins with Old English period, right? And it is followed by the Middle English period. The Middle English period begins at the date of 1066. What happened then? The Norman Conquest began. Okay, or the Norman Conquest happened. Okay, so the Norman Conquest was the chief element which led to this French influence in English language. ওই যে নরমান কনকোয়েস্টটা হয়েছিল 1066-এ, সেটাই হচ্ছে ইম্পর্টেন্ট এলিমেন্ট, দ্য মোস্ট ইম্পর্টেন্ট এলিমেন্ট for the influence of French in English language, or the inclusion of the French loan words into English. What are loan words? Loan শব্দটার মানে জানো? Do you know the meaning of loan? Loan means you have to take something from someone. Okay. Similarly, loan words are what? Loan words are those words which are taken, which are borrowed from other sources, other languages. Okay, so what we find here is that French loan words in English are those words which actually are present in French but are now borrowed into English. Okay, so what is the importance of the French influence? Okay, let's look into that first. So as I told you, the Norman Conquest of 1066 had a profound influence on the English language because English ceased to be the language of the governing class. Okay, because of the conquest, the whole lot of governance is changing. Okay, the Normans represented a higher culture, and the French culture pervaded under the French rule. So England is being dominated, is being ruled, or was being ruled during that time by the French. So what do we find? We find that the influence of the French culture or the French language was developing to its extreme point. Okay, and what we find over here is that upon this time English had been more or less a pure tongue, okay, with a sprinkling of Latin, Celtic and Danish words, where we see that these words were coming along. Latin influence had happened by that time. Latin influence actually happened in 3 different stages. Okay, we will talk it in a different class. So more or less English was a pure tongue with sprinklings of Latin or Celtic or Danish words, but when the Normans came to power, the English vocabulary was inundated by the French loan words. It was completely filled with the French loan words. And if you read Sir Walter Scott's Ivanhoe, a historical novel, you will see that it is a living picture of this period. Okay, where the Norman prelates occupied all important positions in the church, and high military officials, or all those positions were held by the Normans. Okay, so but what we find over here is that you might question that whether there was any connection between the Normans and the English before the Norman Conquest. Yes, they had some kind of affiliations. They had some kind of connections even before the Norman Conquest, social, and ecclesiastical intercourse began among the ruling classes of England and Normandy, chiefly because the Normans themselves were of the Scandinavian race. Okay, I have told you about the Scandinavian influence. So, the words introduced before the conquest of 1066 include castle. So, what we find over here is that which replaced the Old English word borg, B-U-R-G. Okay, and it also replaced Capon and Bacon. Okay, so what we find here is that these words are being already, these words were already replaced. Okay, especially when the administration flowed into several hands of the several hands of the French people, we find the Old English administrative words king and queen remained, but the French rulers introduced a huge number of words in spheres of administration, military, and also law. Okay, so the king and queen, these two words remained, but what we find, the French rulers introduced a huge number of words which were from the sphere of administration which they were ruling, also in the sphere of military and law. The churches, molded in French manner, also accepted the ecclesiastical terms. Ecclesiastical means religious. Okay, ecclesiastical terms which were of French origin. Moral terms also abound, and terms of art and literature, as well as the terms of science and architecture. Also, sports, medical, fashion, food, nearly in all aspects of social superiority of French encourage the massive borrowings from French vocabulary. Okay, um, not only in the intellectual field but also in the vocabulary of household articles these words flowed. মানে শুধুমাত্র যে রাজারা যে রাজত্ব করছে তাদের শুধুমাত্র আওয়াজ বা যেখানটা অ্যাডমিনিস্ট্রেশন রয়েছে সেখানটায় শুধুমাত্র সেই ভয়েসগুলো পৌঁছাচ্ছে, সেই ওয়ার্ডসগুলো ইউজড হচ্ছে, দ্যাট ইজ নট দ্য কেস. Okay, what we find over here is that the words perpetrated into the common folds. Okay, common হাউসহোল্ডের মধ্যেও সেই সমস্ত জিনিসগুলোই তোমার ওয়ার্ডস চলে যাচ্ছে. Okay, so these household articles or the vocabulary of the household articles were also influenced by the French. When we compare with the Scandinavian, French loans were larger in number. Okay, while homely and elementary words were English, the better words which reflected the higher culture was of French origin. So, in a word, we can say that the French borrowings also show upon the social classifications. Okay, মানে সাধারণ ওয়ার্ডস যেগুলো ইউজ হচ্ছে সেই সাধারণ ওয়ার্ডসগুলো দেখা যাচ্ছে কি সেই সাধারণ ওয়ার্ডসগুলো হয়তো ইংলিশ রয়ে গেছে, বাট তার যে কাউন্টার পার্ট, তার যে সিনোনিম বলতে পারো, তার থেকে কোনো বেটার ওয়ার্ডস সেগুলো হচ্ছে ফ্রেঞ্চ কালচার থেকে আসছে. অ্যান্ড হোয়াট উই ফাইন্ড দ্যাট উই গেট আ ফিল দ্যাট দোজ ওয়ার্ডস belong to some kind of a higher culture. Okay, তার মধ্যে একটা অ্যাটিটিউড রয়েছে. Okay, which gives us a feel that it belongs to the higher society. And as I was telling that whether they had any kind of connections, whether the French had any kind of connection before the Norman Conquest of 1066. Of course, the English language had come into contact with the French and had been affected by it even before the Norman Conquest. since the ascension of King Edward to the throne of England. But even before the Norman Conquest, social and ecclesiastical intercourse had begun among the ruling classes of England and Normandy. Okay, this intercourse actually led to the borrowing of those words. ওকে, আমি যখন তোমার সাথে কথা বলছি, তোমার সাথে হচ্ছে আলাপ পরিচয় হচ্ছে, it is quite natural that I would try to engage in some kind of conversation where both can understand this topic, and while we are doing so, it is quite natural that a language which is quite nascent at its stage, যেটা খুবই হচ্ছে ভোকাবুলারি এখনো ফাঁকা, সেই জায়গাগুলোয় তারা কি করবে, তারা হচ্ছে বড় করবে. ফর এক্সাম্পল, ইফ আই ডোন্ট হ্যাভ ওয়ার্ডস টু এক্সপ্রেস মাই ফিলিংস বাট ইউ হ্যাভ অ্যান্ড উই আর কনভার্সিং, তখন আমরা কি করব, বা আমি কি করব, আমি হচ্ছে আই উইল বড় ওয়ার্ডস ফ্রম ইউ, রাইট, তোমার থেকে হচ্ছে নেব. And that is what is happening over here. Even before the Norman Conquest, we see this social and the religious conversation is going on. This conversation is leading to the, is though limited to the higher class or the ruling class of England and Normandy. What we find, this inflection or these borrowings are coming along. Okay, so as I told you that the Normans were of Scandinavian race, having come to France more than a century earlier, and they adopted Northern French as their language. Okay, they were of Germanic stock like the English, whom they were soon to conquer. And what we find here is that the new king and his Norman nobles introduced a few French words connected with the new culture and way of life. Okay, and it was also included into the English. ঠিক আছে, যারা হচ্ছে এই নরমানস বলছি, তারা কি, তারা স্ক্যান্ডিনেভিয়ান রেস. ওকে, তারা স্ক্যান্ডিনেভিয়ান রেস, তারা কি ফ্রান্সে এসছে অলমোস্ট আ সেঞ্চুরি অ্যাগো. ওকে, আর তারা তাদের নর্দার্ন ফ্রেঞ্চ যে ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজটা, সেটাকেই তারা অ্যাডপ্ট করে নিয়েছে. আর এবার আমরা যে ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজটা ধরছি, সেই ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজটা কি, ইজ অফ জার্মানিক স্টক. স্ক্যান্ডিনেভিয়ান ওই সমস্ত জার্মানিক ট্রাইবের মধ্যেই তো পড়ছে, রাইট. সো হোয়াট ইউ ফাইন্ড ওভার হিয়ার ইজ দ্যাট when they are having some kind of Germanic words within them and they are adopting Northern French as their language, what we find যখন তারা হচ্ছে conquer করছে, when they are conquering England, that kind of impression is falling on what, falling on the English language. ঠিক আছে, স্ক্যান্ডিনেভিয়ান ইনফ্লুয়েন্স কিন্তু আগে হয়ে গেছে, ঠিক আছে, বাট নর্দার্ন ফ্রেঞ্চ যেটা হচ্ছে আরও বেশি পাওয়ারফুল, আরও বেশি হচ্ছে পাওয়ারফুল হচ্ছে, কারণ সেটা কঙ্কার করা হচ্ছে অনেকটা বেশি এলাকায়, সেই জিনিসটাও কিন্তু অ্যাপ্লাইড হচ্ছে. ক্লিয়ার? what we find over here is that these words were spoken only in the English court. Okay, they could not affect the common tongue. Even the Saxon nobility despised the foreign language. But what we find here is that, but still it existed, and William the Conqueror, through his victory at the Battle of Hastings in 1066, hastened and comprehended the process which had already begun. Okay, with the conquest and reordering of the government and upper social life of the England, the influx of the French words into the English words began thoroughly. Okay, যে আগের থেকেই কিন্তু ফ্রেঞ্চ ইনফ্লুয়েন্সটা হতো, মানে যখন হচ্ছে একজন একজনের সাথে কথা বলছে, বাট এই যে ব্যাটেল অফ হেস্টিংস যখন 1066 হচ্ছে, দ্য নরমান কনকোয়েস্ট হচ্ছে, সেটাই কি, সেটাই এই প্রসেস অফ ফ্রেঞ্চ ইনফ্লুয়েন্সটাকে আরও বেশি বাড়িয়ে দিচ্ছে। ওকে, সো যেটা বলছিলাম অ্যাডমিনিস্ট্রেটিভ টার্মস, what we see that as they are the ruling class, as the French are the ruling class, it is quite easy to find that the administrative terms will be in French, okay, which are borrowed by the English people. Administrative terms are the largest in number. Nearly all English words relating to government and administration are French, which suggests the French domination. ওকে, মানে সে তারা কতটা ডমিনেট করেছে সেটা হচ্ছে বুঝিয়ে দিচ্ছে। কি করে? ফর এক্সাম্পল, দ্য ওয়ার্ডস লাইক ক্রাউন, CROWN, ক্রাউন, স্টেট, গভর্নমেন্ট, reign, 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 realm, 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 sovereign, minister, chancellor, council, council, authority, parliament, exchequer, empire, royal, prerogative, majesty, sceptre, tyrant, oppress, assembly, static, treaty, alliance, record, repeal, adjourn, tax, subsidy, revenue, tally, subject, allegiance, rebel, traitor, treason. All these words are of administrative origin, are administrative terms, and all these words are French words which are borrowed directly into English language. Okay, this is not the end. Also, other words we find like exile, public, liberty, office, treasurer, chamberlain, marshal, viscount, warden, mayor, constable, feud, noble, peer, PER, prince, duke, count, marquis, baron, square, page, square as in the administrative post, courtier, retinue, sir, madam, liege, master, mistress, manor, bailiff, vassal, homage, peasant, slave, servant, and so on. Okay, and several other words were incorporated within the English language. Okay, some of the keywords however remain English, like the king, queen, lord, lady, and earl. But what we find over here is that most of the terms are of French origin. Okay, similarly what we find when they are administrating, যখন তারা অ্যাডমিনিস্ট্রেশন করছে তার সাথে সাথে আরও কি হয়, তার সাথে সাথে তারা military becomes a part, an important part of administration. Okay, and along with that, law, the terms related to law are also borrowed from French language. Okay, so what we find over here is that all the words of administration along with the words of military and law are borrowed from French, because the domination or the ruling of these people is being done by whom? Is being done by this person, not this person, the French community. Okay, so what we find here is that all the words in this field, that is the military and law terms, all the words in this field are of French origin. For example, the word army is French. Army, navy, war, peace, enemy, battle, combat, skirmish, siege, defense, ambush, stratagem, retreat, soldier, garrison, guard, um, spy, captain, companion, champion, lieutenant, sergeant, dart, lance, banner, ensign, mail, buckler, archer, moat, chieftain, havoc, array, harness, brandish, vanquish, and many other words. All these words are of military terms are of French origin. Okay. Similarly, the law terms, as I told you, because administration, military, and law are quite dependent on each other or quite interlinked. Okay, so under the French rule, a well organized legal system was established in England. Okay, and all the proceedings in a court of law were continued in French. সমস্ত কিছু ফ্রেঞ্চে করা হচ্ছে, and তার ফলে কি, as a result the legal codes were written in French, so nearly all the legal terms were of French origin except the two key words law and bylaw, which only were English. Okay, so the law terms that are borrowed from French are like justice, judgment, crime, just, judge, assize, bar, plea, suit, sue, plaintiff, defendant, advocate, attorney, bill, petition, complaint, summons, indictment, jury, panel, felony, evidence, proof, bail, ransom, verdict, sentence, decree, martial, award, fine, forfeit, punishment, prison, goal, plead, accuse, pledge, depose, blame, arrest, warrant, assail, condemn, convict, banish, acquit, pardon, trespass, assault, libel, slander, adultery, property, estate, tenant, dower, legacy, patrimony, heritage, heir, executor, entail, innocent, culpable. All these words are French law terms, and you will see that several words that you speak in your everyday life is actually of French origin. Those are French words. For example, তুমি attorney শব্দটা, crime শব্দটা, judge শব্দটা you speak in your daily life, so you know part of French, right? So proof, তুমি সবসময় proof চাও, and proof is a French word. Okay, so what we find over here is that several places, several instances we can see that these French words have taken its place in the English language. Similarly, if we look into the moral terms or the religious terms which are borrowed by the English people from French language, for example, religious terms of French origin which we see in English language is religion itself, the word religion itself. Okay, this word religion is of French origin. Similarly, theology, sermon, homily, sacrament, baptism. Baptism is a French word. Okay, communion, confusion, penance, prayer, orison, lesson, passion, psalms, clerk, prelate, cardinal, legate, dean, chaplain, vicar, abbess, notary, um, convent, friar, hermit, crucifix, incense, image, chapel, um, and many more. Okay, so what we find here is that আরও আছে, আরও যেগুলো হচ্ছে এখন হঠাৎ করে মাথায় আসছে না বা কটা বই দেখতে হবে. What we find here is that also devotion, the word devotion, sacrifice, reverence, temptation, damnation, okay, pestilence, immorality, all these words are of French origin. Okay, similarly, what we find here is that the moral terms of French origin were popularly accepted because of the churches being molded in the French manner. Okay, as we have seen, the administration was controlled by the French people, right? French royalty সেটাকে govern করছে. That's why the French words were used in the administrative, military, and law. Okay, those terms were included. But at the same time, religion was one of the chiefest medium through which society could be controlled. Right. So, as the moral terms, as the churches were molded into the French form, as they were governed by the French power, that's why this religion or this moral words like piety, sanctity, charity, mercy, pity, obedience, virtue, divine, reverence, pray, repent, chant, confess, solemn, adore, devout, martyr, convent, ordain, and anoint, and many more. All these words belong to what? All these words belong to the French language. Okay, and when you will look into the architectural side or the science, terms related to science and architecture, you will be mesmerized, or you will understand how powerful the influence of French was. Okay, the terms of literature were also borrowed from the French in abundance. Okay, why? Because of the superior cultural heritage of the French. Okay, such terms came more with the increase of the artistic activity in England after the Norman Conquest. For example, words like art, paint, sculpture, music, color, beauty, figure, image, tone, picture, tragedy, prologue, chronicle, romance, prose, poet, literature, rhythm, romance, story, title, preface, volume, chapter, paper, pen, treatise, and many other terms were included into the literary sphere. Okay, and সবকটাই কি? All these words are of French origin. Similarly, সায়েন্স অ্যান্ড আর্কিটেকচার যদিও দেখি, সায়েন্স অ্যান্ড আর্কিটেকচারে হচ্ছে দেখতে পাবো কি দিস ওয়ার্ডস লাইক লজিক, জিওমেট্রি, এগুলো তো সায়েন্স ওয়ার্ডস. দিজ আর অফ belongs to the science origin. Right. These are terms related to science. right? So these words like grammar, compound, copy, clause, phrase, these uh, are of French learning. Okay. Similarly, words like chamber, mansion, ceiling, cathedral, chimney, lattice, wicket, mural, tower, pinnacle, porch, bay, column, pillar, base. All these are of all these belong to the sphere of architecture, and all these are incorporated. All these are borrowed from French. Okay. Not only that, we find that the architecture, science, literature, the words related to all these three are from French. But at the same time, what we find, this French words, this French influence was first happened to be affecting whom? It affected the aristocratic society, the upper sections of the society, right? So along with that, what we find, the terms related to fashion and dress was also included. Okay, so the terms that are over here is that we see over here is that the dress, the word dress itself is of French origin. Fashion, apparel, habit, gown, okay, robe, garment, attire, cape, hood, cloak, coat, frock, collar, veil, train, chemise, um, boot, adorn, luxury, satin, button, buckle, embroidery, petticoat, tussle, handkerchief, uh, fur, blue, brown, scarlet, saffron, jewel, ornament, brooch, ivory, enamel, turquoise, um, ruby, emerald, sapphire, pearl, diamond, uh, crystal, and several other words. Several other words are from French. Okay, so what we find over here is that this superiority of culture, the social superiority um, of French, is responsible for some words which have this homely counterpart in English. Okay, for example, uh, beef, ox, cow, calf. For mutton, that is ram, sheep, lamb. And what we find here is that these French synonyms were used for what? For their superiority over the language. Okay, so what we find here is that even the occupations, the that were there, that had these names come along. Okay, um, for example, humble occupations. Okay, humble occupations bear English names such as baker, miller, smith, weaver, saddler, shepherd, shoemaker, cowherd, wheelwright, fisherman. But occupations which have direct contact with the French ruling class are taken from, uh, which are taken by the French people, and so bore the English names. For example, tailor. Okay, tailor would do what? Tailor would stitch. Okay, similarly, butcher, painter, mason, carpenter, joiner. Okay, so French synonyms were borrowed for more decorative purposes because, as I have told you, they gave some kind of feeling of supremacy. And what I find here is that English synonyms sound more colloquial, and the French ones are borrowed for literary purpose. Okay, and what we find over here is that this influence This influence actually led to the development of the vocabulary of English language to the greatest extent that we can see today. Okay, so actually it actually left an imprint on every section, almost every section of the society. Okay, though it was mainly concerned with the aristocratic sections, but it it laid its imprint on the most important sections. Okay, several hundred words are of French origin. Okay, the words that we use today are of French origin. Okay, so this is the French influence on English language.